Welcome to the show, everyone. You watch UAP Truth 33. I'm John. I'm your host. Glad you guys can make it. I was watching Jim Mars. You guys remember Jim Mars? He and this is what's it saddens me, man, because we're losing a lot of these older guys that have been around that know a lot about this subject that covered this subject very well, that wrote a lot of books, and we're losing them, man. The Stanton Friedmans, Jim Mars. And look, he passed years ago. But I was just watching some old clips of him, and we gotta replace these guys, man, and I don't think that I'm the guy to fill the shoes of Jim Mars, but, um, it's good to see new blood like Jesse Michaels and, even Jeremy Corbell. Some people have their problems with that crowd, but, I don't, and they released some footage recently, and it was very compelling. It's UAP passing over the clouds, and I saw it on Psychoactivo, Pavel's channel, and man, it is awesome. So I'll put the clip in here. That's not what this episode's about. I try not to chase ambulances. Not saying Pavel does, but you got these guys that just, they chase whatever the new story is. And I'll do that. And I'll cover footage like once a month. I usually do best UFO videos or something like that. But I usually like try to do the more um I like analyzing how other people view the phenomenon, right? Because I'm trying to figure it out. So today that's what we're gonna do, man. We're gonna just kind of spitball, free will, analyze how some of these authors, content creators, how they view this subject. Um, some are nuts and bolts, some are more spiritual. So we're going to get into that. It's going to get deep. So please stick around. Be right back.
There it is. That's pretty cool, right? I think so. I know that people are not, somebody's not going to be happy with this. There's always somebody. But I do think this is very, very interesting. And based on the provenance and the sensors they used, I think it's a good video, if you ask me. And it is a little bit similar to that other one that I showed you, isn't it? It moves intelligently, I would say. Yeah, that's a good description from Jeremy. There it is. That's pretty wild.
So I want to get into Jim Mars, man, because he wrote this book, our Occulted History, right? And it kind of jives with some of the things that I've been uploading lately about non-human influence on not only like our history, our current events, and possibly some of the ancient history, right? And I'm not so sure that Zacharia Sitchin was full of it. For those of you who don't know about Zacharia Sitchin, so Zacharia Sitchin wrote these books. He wrote like a bestseller. It was like on the bestseller list. It was called The 12th Planet. And it was about these tablets that were discovered in um, like the Iraq area. That's like where ancient Babylon was. The Sumerians. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I'm sure my regular viewers are probably familiar with the Anunnaki, which um, simply means that they came from above, that it came from the heavens. They came, down to earth, and the Anunnaki was like the gods, and there was like, um, there was multitudes of them, and basically, and this is not just Zachariah Sitchin, this is mainstream, that a lot of the things in the Old Testament were basically um, taken from these tablets and almost like rewritten polytheist perspective to a monotheist perspective. So it was like where the Sumerians, they believed in many gods, you know, um, in the Old Testament, it was written as one God. But it's strange because you still see in the Old Testament where they kind of slip up sometimes, right? Because the term Elohim is basically like a plural form of God, and there's other parts of the Old Testament where I don't know exactly the chapter or the verse, but I know it's in Genesis where it says, "Let us create them in our image." And that always struck me, man. And I think it's like right in the beginning of Genesis, it's not hard to find, and it's like, who are they? What, you know, that doesn't sound like a singular God speaking in that verse. And, theologians and whatnot talk around these ideas, and then you look like Noah's Ark, and I think it's like Zula Sutra or something the guy's name was, and that was the Sumerian version of Noah, and but the story is much different. In the Sumerian version, um, they had like a supreme god named Anu. Then he had these two sons, Enlil and Enki, and there was many other gods besides them. But um, the gods basically got tired of us. We were basically a slave species mining gold for these beings, according to Sitchin. This is Zacharia Sitchin's version, and they created us to be basically like a slave species, and they took like a primate and altered the DNA and created humans. Now, eventually, they got tired of us, right? And I guess they decided they were going to wipe us out, because there was some intermixing between us and and them. So there was like these demigods created, and I don't know if that was the exact reason why they wanted to get rid of us, but they decided to flood the place, right? Well, Enki, who was Enlil's brother, I guess he had a half, a hybrid son. And I guess this was Sudra or whatever. I could be mixing up a few specifics of the story, so don't comments if I'm not getting it perfectly correct, but I'm summarizing it pretty well. And Enki pretty much lets him know, yo, this is gonna happen. You better do something. So he builds an ark. And this is where the story difference it goes different from Noah also. Instead of having every two animals and stuff, he basically took their essence, and that makes me think of like DNA, plants, animals and stuff. Now this is Zachariah Sitchin, and dude, I don't know who would believe. I actually think Zachariah Sitchin was possibly onto something, and there's like a whole website, why Sitchin's wrong, and there's like people that said that, because he's not a scholar, he shouldn't be speaking on this or whatever. But that's what happens. Even with archaeologists, they come for people that try to say that there was an advanced civilization and that was on the earth before the last, whatever happened at the Younger Dryas, whatever cataclysm wiped us out. Maybe it was the flood, who knows? But I think there was probably an advanced civilization. I think the evidence of that is staring us in the face everywhere you look, not just Egypt, but worldwide. I'm not too much on the ancient aliens thing where I think everything's aliens, but I do think that whatever these beings are, that they influence us. Do they come from a planet called Nibiru? That's something else Zachariah sits and says. I don't know. Could it be more non-physical, more spiritual? Possible. But I really Jim Mars, dude, in that book, Our Occulted History, it's an awesome book. Like, and really anybody that's like trying to get a different perspective on this phenomenon from just the nuts and bolts aspect needs to read that book, Our Occulted History. And I think, these symbols and stuff that you see, that um obelisks and different symbols that we use, they do convey messages. And man, like I just think Jim Mars was onto something, you know. And I was covering these things the last couple of days. And do your own research. But I think that both of these guys were onto something. And I think that in the end, when it comes out, and I think it's going to come out, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be from the government. It's going to be from other areas. But you see it leaking out. Matthew Brown, David Grush, these guys, even Matthew Pines. I had him on yesterday. I put on a few clips from him when he was on Mr. Obnoxious. Just a really smart guy, and these things are coming out. And I think this is going to be part of the narrative that we're basically hybrids. And if you look at it, we're totally different from any other primate. We have no hair. Just a lot of things. We're different from other animals. Um, so I definitely think that there was some kind of DNA, some kind of manipulation. Maybe we were a slave species, and Zachariah Sitchin, the one other thing he said in his books was that they had us mining for gold because they needed to use it to fix their atmosphere on their planet. Now, who knows? But I will say this: I think it's odd, right? Why did we find graves of ancient peoples with and the grave they'll be draped in gold, or we'll find a sarcophagus or a mummy in Egypt, and everything's laid up in gold. You see in the Old Testament they talk about the Ark of the Covenant is completely laden in gold, and you couldn't make a weapon with gold. You couldn't even make a tool with gold. You can't carve anything with gold. You can't chisel anything with gold. Like gold really had no purpose. But nowadays with computers, um, gold's very valuable. You know, it's a great conductor of electricity. It's awesome in electronics. And who knows? Maybe these advanced beings that maybe are responsible for us being here, maybe they did have us mine of gold. Maybe not for what Zachariah Sitchin said, but maybe for something else. Because I don't understand why these people back in the day placed this huge value on gold, you know? So maybe whoever translated these tablets for Zachariah Sitchin, or if he did it himself, whatever, maybe that aspect of the story is true. Like maybe Zachariah Sitchin is wrong about some things, but not everything, right? And I think that's obvious, right? So, in the tablets, Abraham was Ibram, you know, and if you remember in the beginning of the Old Testament, he was Abram before he became Abraham. So look, there's a lot of parallels between these tablets, the Old Testament, and I think some of this is historical fact. Um, these tablets, they made receipts with them. You know, there was like legal um, opinions printed on these tablets, and basically they were clay. They would, stamp them with a stick like that was like shaped a certain way, and they would just write on the tablet, and then they would bake it, and it would become like a stone. And these are the tablets that they found over there. And this was an advanced civilization. I mean, when I say advanced, I don't mean like, you know, I don't know if they were technologically advanced, but their language, their writing, the way that they wrote everything down was pretty advanced for the time. This is considered the cradle of civilization. But I question that because then they find, places like Göbekli Tepe, which is a little older or at least the same time period, you know. Very interesting. But Jim Morris thinks that all this symbolism, is how these societies that know these facts communicate with each other, right? Over time and space. And that these beings that manipulated us are still um kind of pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Like they have like servants, that they use to have full spectrum dominance over the globe. And then it makes me think like about the conflicts that go on between peoples, like um, like the Middle East, you know, is that a proxy war between two different? It gets wild, man. It gets crazy. I don't know. So this is what I'm into right now. I don't know if you guys read that book or if you guys know about Zacharia Sitchin. You want to hop in the comments, man. I might go into more depth tomorrow. I don't really have the time tonight, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Do you think these things are still pulling strings from behind the scenes? And what are they? Some people think they're, Anunnaki and magic nowadays. That's the new thing since Matthew Brown made them tweets. I don't know if that's the case, but I'd be interested in what you know. So hit me up in the comments, please. Like, share it to 2 friends. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Government, go, yeah. He can't even speak.